Chapter 31-38. However, just as Chu Feihu and the others were trying to buy people's hearts, they realized that it wouldn't work at all. In order to ensure the fairness of this competition, Steward Qin had already prohibited all actions of bribery. If it was said that Bailey Hongzhuang's previous performance was not enough to make Steward Qin stand on her side, but after the effects of the fusion replenishing pill spread out, he became more and more interested in Bailey Hongzhuang. Compared to an old fellow like Chu Feihu, who was difficult to control, Bailey Hongzhuang, who focused on cultivation, was more suitable for the existence of the magic refining pagoda. This was because Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about the changes in power in the magic refining pagoda, nor did she want to monopolize the entire market, much less use it to threaten him. Chu Feihu had stayed in the magic refining pagoda for so many years, and Steward Qin had already felt that this area was getting out of his control. On the contrary, once Chu Feihu led the alchemists and doctors to protest together, he often had no other choice. If he could take advantage of this opportunity to kick Chu Feihu away, this seemed to be a good decision. Although Chu Feihu's alchemy skills were indeed outstanding, he did not feel that kicking away a disobedient alchemist was a great loss. In the blink of an eye, the 1-month deadline had arrived. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 came out of seclusion on time on this day. They did not deliberately try to understand what had happened during this period of time. Today they just happened to go and take a look at the results. The entire magic refining pagoda was abnormally concerned about this matter. So on this day, it was the same as a month ago when Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu took out the fusion replenishing pill. Many cultivators gathered in front of the counter, and the number was only a lot more than a month ago. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 arrived at the counter, they saw that it was already packed to the brim. However, when the cultivators saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 appear, they all tacitly made way for them, allowing them to walk unimpeded to the front of the counter. Chapter 31-39. I'm afraid Master Chu has already expected this final result, so he doesn't dare to come now. That's true. With Chu Feihu's position in the magic refining tower, if he really loses to number 18, I'm afraid he himself won't be able to accept this result. I feel that this number 18 is a rising star. Based on the strength she has displayed so far, she doesn't lose to Chu Feihu at all. Furthermore, she doesn't have Chu Feihu's attitude of taking advantage of her seniority. We can't buy enough healing medicine in the magic refining tower. Isn't it because Chu Feihu deliberately did it? This number 18 is much simpler and more to my liking. Everyone was discussing animatedly, each with their own thoughts. However, everyone was looking forward to the final result today. One of the 2 sides would definitely leave the magic refining tower. Not long after, Chu Feihu appeared with a group of alchemists and doctors. Compared to the overbearing attitude he had when he appeared a month ago, Chu Feihu was clearly not in a good mood today. His face was taut all the way. Master Chu, you're here. Steward Qin greeted with a smile. Chu Feihu nodded his head indifferently, ignoring Steward Qin's smile. He felt that the reason why he had fallen into such a situation had a lot to do with Steward Qin. If he could bribe someone before the 1-month deadline, then it wouldn't be a problem to turn all of this around. However, Steward Qin suddenly stopped him from doing so, which naturally caused him to be unhappy. He even faintly felt that this matter was most likely done by Bailey Hongzhuang and Steward Qin, because this was the only way to explain it. Seeing that Chu Feihu did not buy his words, Steward Qin did not care at all. In any case, Chu Feihu was going to leave the magic refining tower today, so he should not need to see this old fellow's arrogant face in the future. Since everyone is already here, let's start the voting. Steward Qin waved his hand, and Sweet Dream and a few other staff members immediately brought out the voting board. I hope that all cultivators can vote according to the specific effects of this fusion replenishing pill. Do not vote recklessly because of your own emotions. Before voting, Steward Qin could not help but remind him. Hearing Steward Qin's words, the ridicule in Chu Feihu's eyes became even more intense. He understood that Steward Qin wanted to use this opportunity to kick him away, but he would definitely not let Steward Qin do as he wished. His position in the magic refining tower was already deeply rooted. Even if Steward Qin wanted to kick him away, it would not be an easy task. Xiao Yihan was the first to vote for Bailey Hongzhuang. He had always been magnanimous. To tell the truth, Bailey Hongzhuang's fusing nourishing pill was indeed very effective. Chapter 3140. Bailey Hongzhuang had absolute confidence in the effect of the fusion replenishing pill she had refined. However, she had been in seclusion for the past month and did not know much about the outside world. She believed that as long as Chu Feihu did not play any tricks behind her back, the final winner would definitely be her. Especially when she saw the complicated expression on Chu Feihu's face when he arrived, she felt a little relieved. If Chu Feihu had secretly bribed someone, he should be extremely arrogant. Every time Sweet Dream read out a new vote, everyone's heart could not help but skip a beat. It was not until more than 30 votes were called out that everyone realized that Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu were in a stalemate. The votes of the two were closely following each other. Every time one of them surpassed the other would overtake them in the next moment. It was precisely because it was difficult to determine the winner that everyone was even more curious about the situation. Their hearts were hanging tightly in their throats. Chu Feihu, who was originally in an extremely bad mood, looked a little better after seeing this scene. It seemed that the previous rumors were probably just rumors. Not so many people believed that Bailey Hongzhuang's fusion replenishing pill was effective. If this situation continued, he might still be able to win. However, the results of the voting left everyone dumbfounded. Number 18 has received 1 vote. Number 18 has received 1 vote. Number 18 has received 1 vote. All the remaining votes went to Bailey Hongzhuang, allowing her votes to quickly overtake Chu Feihu's, making the latter unable to catch up. At this time, every time Sweet Dream read out the votes, Chu Feihu's face darkened. By the time Sweet Dream finished reading out all the votes, Chu Feihu's face was already as black as the bottom of a pot. The previous joy had completely dissipated. The effect of this face slapping was stronger than any other method. In the end, all the votes went to Bailey Hongzhuang. What the hell was this? Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at the final votes. Chu Feihu had 18 votes, while she had 28 votes. She had 10 more votes than Chu Feihu. This result was not out of her expectations. As long as both parties did not buy the nourishing pill from both sides, they would naturally think that their nourishing pill was more effective. However, she had taken out a total of 30 fusion nourishing pills, but there were only 28 votes. This proved that the two cultivators who bought her fusion nourishing pills thought that Chu Feihu's fusion nourishing pills were better than hers. Why was that? Lu Mingxi looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. He had voted for Chu Feihu without hesitation, but he did not expect that he still could not change the situation. The result of the vote is very clear now. Everyone knows the result. Steward Qin slowly spoke, but his gaze quietly fell on Chu Feihu. There was no need to continue speaking. Chu Feihu's expression was livid as he said, "I don't believe this result. It must be you guys messing with me. Otherwise, how could I lose to a brat?" No matter what, he would not accept such an outcome. "Master Chu, you were the one who suggested this method. Now that the results are out, what do you mean by that?" Steward Qin frowned. Chu Feihu's level of difficulty was still the same as before. As a result, he started to be shameless. Chapter 3141. Grandmaster Chu, what do you mean by that? The result is already very obvious. Previously, you kept finding excuses to refuse, so I listened to you and restarted the competition. Now that the results are out, you're acting shamelessly again. Even if your position in the Devil Refining Tower is very high, it doesn't seem right for you to be so shameless, right? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. Her ink-black phoenix eyes were filled with a touch of ridicule. Originally, she didn't have any enmity towards Chu Feihu. It was Chu Feihu who came looking for trouble. Now that things had developed to this point, Chu Feihu kept changing his mind. Naturally, she couldn't help but feel angry. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone as shameless as him. When Xiren couldn't help but sigh, they didn't want to continue being troubled by this matter. They didn't think that Chu Feihu would continue to harp on this matter. this old man has cultivated for so many years. Could it be that he's used all his ability to cultivate his shamelessness? Shangguan Yingying was speechless. No matter what, Chu Feihu was an elder. But what was the situation now? He turned hostile just like that. All the promises they had made before were useless. No wonder all the alchemists and doctors in the Devil Refining Tower can't beat him. Anyone who has a bit of shame probably can't beat him, Di Beichen said indifferently. When everyone heard Di Beichen and the other two's words, the corners of their mouths couldn't help but twitch. They seemed to be unable to hold back their smiles. However, they had to admit that Di Beichen and the other two were telling the truth. Even they couldn't stand Chu Feihu going back on his word. What are you juniors now? You're just spouting nonsense here. Chu Feihu scolded mercilessly. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were cold. Chu Feihu, you're the one who went back on your word. Now you're saying that we're wrong. Isn't this a little too laughable? This must be one of your schemes. This old man will definitely not compromise like this, Chu Feihu said angrily. At this moment, the anger that he had been suppressing for the past few days could not help but erupt. When he thought about how he had been forced into such a state with his status, he was unable to restrain his anger. You're crazy, Bailey Hongzhuang spat. The cultivators present were all dumbfounded. Such an unreasonable Chu Feihu made them speechless. Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if she was being pestered by a mad dog, making her speechless to the extreme. If you're willing to bet, then you have to accept your loss. Since you've lost, then scram out of the demonic training tower. This is our agreement from before. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's words were no longer polite. I'm very busy. I don't have so much time to waste like you. Being able to accompany you to this point is already my limit. If you want to continue wasting my time, I'm not interested in it at all. No wonder your alchemy skills can only reach such a level at such an old age. If you have the time to chase away alchemists who are stronger than you, why don't you use it to improve your alchemy skills? That way, you won't have to rush to suppress and chase away outstanding alchemists when they appear. However, Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Chu Feihu indifferently. The disdain in her eyes could not be more obvious. I'm afraid you'll only be like this for the rest of your life. Ridicule. This was blatant mockery. Chapter 3142. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, a hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of everyone present, including Steward Qin. They really did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang, who had always been very silent, would actually speak so fiercely. The words that came out of her mouth shocked everyone to the point that they did not know what to say. All this time, Chu Feihu had been looking for trouble with Bailey Hongzhuang. In Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, she was actually just accompanying Chu Feihu to make trouble. And now, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang was angry was not because of Chu Feihu's strength and shamelessness, but because she did not have the leisure and time to accompany Chu Feihu to continue making trouble. So, this competition that seemed extremely dangerous in the eyes of everyone was just a farce in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes? Chu Feihu was also dumbfounded at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang's sarcasm made him extremely unhappy. But Bailey Hongzhuang was too lazy to accompany him, which made him feel like he was just a child in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. Chu Feihu could not help but look at the alchemists behind him. Those alchemists and doctors who usually helped him with his plans did not know what to say at this moment. The outcome had already been decided, and everything Chu Feihu was doing now was just a dying struggle. I don't accept this result. I definitely can't lose to her. Unless you can give me a more authoritative answer, I won't believe it. Chu Feihu had also calmed down at this moment. To him, if he really failed, it was not that he could not accept it. After all, this was because he was not capable enough. But what he could not accept was that he believed that all of this was a conspiracy between Bailey Hongzhuang and Steward Qin. He could leave the magic refining tower, but he could not leave in such an unclear manner. If he left by himself, then at least he could maintain his usual pride. Even if he went to the other islands of the Punglai Island, he would still be able to live a good life. On the contrary, if he was driven out because of his failure, then this would be a dark history, and he would not be able to raise his head at all. Since Grandmaster Chu is so unwilling to accept this result, I've invited 2 alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate to judge the effects of this nourishing pill. What do you think? At this time, Steward Qin stood up and gave his suggestion. As Steward Qin's voice fell, the faces of everyone present changed. Chu Feihu's eyes became even gloomier. He knew that this matter was related to Steward Qin. This was clearly something that had been prepared for a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang was also a little surprised. Looking at the situation, Steward Qin was already prepared. The alchemists of 100 Flowers Gate did not go out often. It would take a certain amount of time to go to 100 Flowers Island to invite them back from the demonic refining pagoda. Obviously, Steward Qin had already invited them over. Noticing Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, Steward Qin explained with a smile. This competition has caused a huge sensation in the demon refining pagoda. In order to show enough fairness, I specially went to the 100 Flowers Gate to invite 2 alchemists back. I hope young Master D doesn't mind. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment then nodded. All right. She had enough confidence in her own nourishing pill, so she naturally didn't need to worry about anything. Furthermore, she could feel that Steward Qin's attitude this time was clearly more biased towards her side than the last time. Since that was the case, what did it matter if she gave Steward Qin face? Chapter 3143. Steward Qin gave Sweet Dream a look, and Sweet Dream immediately went to the back to invite the 2 alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate over. This was the first time Bailey Hongzhuang had seen the alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate. Both of them were wearing white clothes, and their expressions were somewhat arrogant. They faintly emitted a somewhat otherworldly aura, as if they were not stained with dust. However, Bailey Hongzhuang could tell at a glance that this so-called otherworldly aura was just a disguise. However, that arrogance was real, and Bailey Hongzhuang was not unfamiliar with this kind of arrogance at all. Thinking about how they had pretended to be alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate on Emerald Island, they suddenly understood why Gao Hanshun had some doubts about them before. It was probably because their clothes were not right, but the arrogance and disdain they showed at that time was somewhat similar to the 2 alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate in front of them. When Steward Qin saw the 2 alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate, a polite smile appeared on his face, and the 2 alchemists also put away their arrogance when facing Steward Qin. In front of the steward of the magic refining tower, their arrogance was nothing. 2 alchemists, please help me verify which of these 2 fusion replenishing pills has the better effect. Steward Qin took out 2 white porcelain bottles, which belonged to Bailey Hongzhuang and Steward Qin. This was also what he had just obtained from the cultivators present. After all, not all cultivators had taken the fusion replenishing pills in the past month. At this time, Steward Qin turned his head to look at Chu Feihu and said, Master Chu, you can confirm for yourself whether this is your fusion replenishing pill. Hearing that, Chu Feihu walked to the counter with a cold expression. He looked at the nourishing pill in the white porcelain bottle. After confirming that it was indeed refined by him, he nodded. That's right, it is indeed refined by me. Bailey Hongzhuang took a step forward, and also confirmed that the other fusion replenishing pill was refined by her. We guarantee on the reputation of the 100 Flowers Gate that our inspection today will not be biased towards any side. Everything that is said must be the truth. The 2 alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate suddenly made a gesture, and a pious expression appeared on their faces. Seeing this, the tension and doubt on Chu Feihu's face completely disappeared. The disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate had their own beliefs. When they said such words, it meant that they must be telling the truth, and would not be tempted by any benefits. Bailey Hongzhuang did not understand what this meant, but from their pious expressions, she could tell that this was a promise that was exclusive to the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate. I didn't think that the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate would be so serious. They even said their oath. This means that they will definitely speak the truth. Steward Qin should also want to use their witness to make Chu Feihu's mouth shut up completely. I originally thought that this matter was done by Steward Qin and Bailey Hongzhuang. But now it seems that the situation is not like this. Let's continue watching. We'll know the real result very soon. When the time comes, it'll be wonderful. Chapter 3144. I feel that this 100 Flowers Gate is quite interesting. They are simply devout believers. Shangguan Yingying could not help but whisper. When Xiren nodded, they should have their own beliefs, but this is also quite good. At least they won't lie. Look at Chu Feihu, who was making such a ruckus before. Now he has completely quieted down. I think this Steward Qin is also quite powerful. It seems that he had already expected this. So he invited the alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate over early on. Shangguan Yingying's gaze fell on Steward Qin. As expected, to be able to become the steward of the Demon Refining Tower, his ability was definitely not bad. Chu Feihu should have caused quite a bit of trouble for Steward Qin these past few years. I'm afraid that Steward Qin wants to borrow Hong Zhuang's hand to drive Chu Feihu out. Bewitching slowly said, but his tone was unusually certain. As soon as these words came out, when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but look at each other. No wonder they felt from the beginning that Steward Qin's attitude was different from before. Now after Bewitching's reminder, they really understood. In that case, isn't Bailey Hongzhuang being used by Steward Qin? You can say that, but this is not a bad thing for us. Chu Feihu is no longer of any value. If we help Steward Qin with this, he will repay us in the future. Bewitching's expression was indifferent. With their previous relationship, they were using each other. As long as they did not cause the other party to suffer great losses, it would be fine. The speed of the two alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate was not slow. However, when they detected the effect of Bailey Hongzhuang's fusion replenishing pill, a hint of surprise and astonishment appeared in their eyes. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the two alchemists. Naturally, they did not ignore the changes in their expressions. Very quickly, the two alchemists turned around and looked at the crowd. We already have a result. When these words were said, Chu Feihu and the other alchemists and doctors all looked at them with rapt attention. This final result was related to their interests. The result of our appraisal is that number 18's fusion replenishing pill has a better effect. A calm voice slowly rang out, clearly entering everyone's ears. Hearing this, the smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's lips couldn't help but widen. The two of them really didn't lie. Chu Feihu's expression froze. He stared at the alchemist in shock, wondering if he had heard wrong. If the alchemist was not lying, then this answer was a little too unbelievable. Why? Why do you guys say that her nourishing pill is better than mine? In front of the 100 Flowers Gate's alchemists, Chu Feihu didn't act impudently, but he really wanted to know the reason. Calm down. An alchemist motioned for Chu Feihu to calm down. We will explain it to you. Seeing this, Chu Feihu calmed down a little. However, the hostility in his eyes was still obvious. This result was too unbelievable for him. Grandmaster Chu, there's nothing wrong with the nourishing pill you refined. It's the same effect as the nourishing pill refined by an ordinary alchemist. Isn't that enough? How could I possibly lose? Chapter 3145. Number 18's thawing replenishing pill is much more effective than the thawing replenishing pills we normally see. If my guess is correct, the effect should be increased by 20%. Saying this, the 100 Flower Gate alchemists' gaze couldn't help but fall on Bailey Hongzhuang. Even they were surprised by this answer, and found it hard to believe. Their 100 Flower Gate had existed on Penglai Island for so many years, and had produced many excellent alchemists. However, they had never seen an alchemist who could make a pill with such an effect. Normally, they wouldn't take regular alchemists seriously. However, they couldn't help but admire Bailey Hongzhuang for being able to make such a pill. Everyone couldn't help but cry out after hearing this result. Their gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang were filled with shock and admiration. No wonder the vote was like this. Number 18's thawing replenishing pill has such an effect. I've never heard of such a thing. Number 18 is really amazing. The answers given by the 100 Flowers Gate's pharmacists are most likely correct. I really didn't see number 18 having such ability. The surprise in Xiao Yihan's eyes was a bit stronger. As early as after taking Bailey Hongzhuang's Rongbudan, he felt the improvement in the efficacy of the pill. Now, after the confirmation of the 100 Flowers Gate's alchemist, he was more and more certain of his answer. How is this possible? I've never heard of such a thing. Chu Feihu couldn't help but take 2 steps back. His originally tough face immediately paled. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't do anything. Her thawing replenishing pill really did have such an effect. Master Chu, I won't hide it from you. This is the first time we've seen something like this. I can only say that number 18's alchemy skills are superb, and has opened our eyes. The 100-Flower Gate alchemist revealed a smile of admiration towards Bailey Hongzhuang. He no longer had any arrogance. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also returned a smile. For a colossus like 100-Flower Gate, it was best not to offend them. If they could form a good relationship with them, it would undoubtedly be best. Everyone keenly noticed that the 100-Flower Gate alchemist had addressed Bailey Hongzhuang as alchemy master. This was enough to prove the weight of Bailey Hongzhuang in their hearts. If everyone looked down on Bailey Hongzhuang before, then now they could completely ignore the problem of her age. Her strength was what was truly powerful. Moreover, Bailey Hongzhuang was so young. As long as she continued to develop on this path, her future would be limitless. After Steward Qin obtained this result, Bailey Hongzhuang's in his heart had changed. Previously, he thought that Bailey Hongzhuang might be a genius alchemist. Now, it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang was a genius alchemist. An alchemist who could refine pills that were 20% stronger than ordinary pills. If this spread out, it would simply be an existence that would shock the world. Not to mention their demon refining tower. Even in 100-Flower Gate, she would be the target of everyone's competition. Young master, how should I address you? The 100-Flower Gate alchemist took a step forward, and took the initiative to express his goodwill to Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 3146. So it's young Master D. The alchemist cupped his hands. If young Master D wants to leave the magic tower one day, our 100-Flowers Gate will definitely welcome you. Following the words of the 100-Flowers Gate's alchemist, the cultivators present were once again envious. This was the 100-Flowers Gate taking the initiative to extend an olive branch. If Bailey Hongzhuang became a member of the 100-Flowers Gate, then her status would be incomparable. When Steward Qin saw that the alchemist of the 100-Flowers Gate had actually poached someone from his place, his expression immediately changed. He suddenly felt that inviting the cultivators of the 100-Flowers Gate over this time was not a wise decision. Thank you. If there's a chance, I'll definitely visit the 100-Flowers Gate, Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. After receiving Bailey Hongzhuang's reply, the alchemist of the 100-Flowers Gate revealed a happy smile. They had come to the magic tower this time, because of Steward Qin. Originally, they thought that it was too troublesome for them to make a move for such a small matter. But now, they felt that this trip was worth it. They had actually discovered the existence of such a genius alchemist. So number 18's name is D Bei. Then she's really rich now. With this ability, no matter where she is, she will definitely be able to do well. Maybe she was a very extraordinary person before, but we just didn't know about it. Chu Feihu has really kicked an iron plate this time. I'm afraid that D Bei was only living on the second floor for a moment of interest. I didn't expect that he would be forced to this point step by step. In the end, the person who was forced to leave was Chu Feihu. It's really laughable. After knowing all of this, Lu Mingxiu's expression became complicated. He really didn't expect that the ordinary cultivator on the second floor, who he had always looked down on, would be so powerful. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. This guy was most likely sick in the head. He was clearly so capable, yet he pretended to be bullied here. Could it be that he was a masochist? Master Chu, the results are out. If you don't believe me, you can check it yourself. After that, you can pack your bags and leave the demon training tower. Steward Qin's attitude was very cold. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang's talent and value had completely exceeded Chu Feihu's, he naturally would not help Chu Feihu in the slightest. On the contrary, the dissatisfaction he had with Chu Feihu over the years had completely exploded at this moment. He hated that he couldn't just let this guy disappear in front of his eyes. Hearing Steward Qin's words, Chu Feihu's face immediately turned extremely ugly. His originally pale face had already turned deathly pale. And when he turned around, he discovered that the alchemists and doctors, who had always followed his lead, had unknowingly distanced themselves from him. It was obvious that they did not want to be implicated by him, and this scene caused his heart to turn cold. A large part of the reason why he had fallen into such a situation was to help this group of people. However, now that he had fallen, these people immediately cut ties with him. How ironic was this? Wait, Chu Feihu said slowly. Steward Qin frowned. What other questions do you have? Chapter 3147. Chu Feihu understood that no one would stand on his side now, but he couldn't give up just like that. His previous status, which was respected by everyone, had now become so down and out. All of this was inseparable from Bailey Hongzhuang. Even if he had to leave, he had to expose Bailey Hongzhuang's true colors. As Chu Feihu's voice fell, Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but step forward and say, "Who do you think you are? If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Now that you've lost, you can leave. What's with all this nonsense? We don't need to pay attention to such a request." Bewitching looked at Chu Feihu with disgust. He had seen many people who were shameless when they lost, but he was the only one who could do what Chu Feihu had done. Did he think that all the rules were set by him? Bailey Hongzhuang had allowed Chu Feihu to cause trouble because they couldn't accept the result of a draw, so they had chosen to compete to the end. Now that everything was over, it wasn't in their character to continue to allow Chu Feihu to do as he pleased. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear black and white eyes were like a cold lake in October, filled with boundless coldness that seemed to be able to freeze everything. "I don't agree," she refused without hesitation, leaving no room for negotiation. "Why?" Chu Feihu looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with burning eyes, as if he wanted to see a trace of guilt in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. Could it be that this harmonizing replenishing pill wasn't refined by you at all, so you don't dare to accept it? Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled mockingly. "Don't try to provoke me, I won't fall for it. If someone asks you to die, will you die? Master Chu is already so old, don't be too naive." Chu Feihu's expression was a little embarrassed when Bailey Hongzhuang mercilessly exposed his provocation. He was still unwilling to give up and said, "If you don't agree to this competition, how will you prove your strength to everyone?" He didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang could withstand his mockery and sarcasm at such a young age. "I know my own strength, why do I need to prove it to others? Master Chu, is your purpose of living for others to see?" Chu Feihu was stunned. The words that he wanted to say were directly stuck in his throat by Bailey Hongzhuang. Every word that came out of this guy's mouth made him feel like he couldn't refute it. He suddenly couldn't understand. The fame and fortune that everyone valued so much, was it not attractive to Bailey Hongzhuang? Following Chu Feihu's provocation and Bailey Hongzhuang's refusal, the expressions on everyone's faces became complicated once again. At the end of the day, if this harmonizing replenishing pill was really refined by Bailey Hongzhuang, then Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed worthy of being called a master alchemist. However, they had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang personally refine a pill. Now that they had seen Bailey Hongzhuang repeatedly refuse, they couldn't help but feel a trace of doubt in their hearts. Could it be that none of this was real? Chu Feihu had been so insistent on competing with Bailey Hongzhuang. Could it be that he had already seen through Bailey Hongzhuang? Chapter 3148. Now that things have turned out this way, you should pack your things and leave. I don't wish to see your shadow in the demonic tower tomorrow. Bailey Hongzhuang calmly left him with these words before getting ready to leave. She did not have the leisure to accompany Chu Feihu in his nonsense. There were no benefits to be gained from this competition, and it was all for the sake of being in the limelight. She had no interest whatsoever. However, just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to leave, Chu Feihu suddenly spoke up. "What do I have to do in order for you to agree to this competition? If you don't agree, I won't accept it." Bailey Hongzhuang's footsteps paused slightly, her eyes as calm as an ancient well suddenly rippling. She raised her hand and raised 5 fingers, 500,000 spirit stones non-negotiable. Once these words were spoken, the crowd could not help but feel shocked. They were almost certain that Bailey Hongzhuang would not agree to this competition. They never thought that the situation would take a turn for the better. However, 500,000 spirit stones was indeed a huge sum of money. This kind of wealth was not something that an average person would be able to produce. However, based on Chu Feihu's wealth, it was not impossible. When Chu Feihu heard the price of 500,000 spirit stones, he was also shocked. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would offer such a price. This was simply asking for an exorbitant price. 500,000 spirit stones. Even if one were to sell pills, one would need quite a lot of them to be able to exchange for so many spirit stones. He had stayed in the demonic tower for so many years and had indeed earned quite a lot of spirit stones. However, 500,000 spirit stones was not something that he could take out without batting an eyelid. Bailey Hongzhuang calmly glanced at Chu Feihu. If you can't pay the price, then don't blame me for what happens next. She had no interest in this competition because if she lost, she would be the one to lose. Even if she won, she would not gain any benefits. Only someone with a screw loose would agree to this. However, if she could take advantage of this opportunity to earn some money, she would not mind. Compared to earning spirit stones by refining pills, this method was much less troublesome. She could also put more of her thoughts on cultivation and didn't need to worry about spirit stones. Bailey Hongzhuang took another step forward. Chu Feihu looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's departing figure, and his heart sank into a struggle. It had taken him a long time to earn back so many spirit stones. He couldn't figure out if Bailey Hongzhuang had made this request because she felt that he couldn't bear to part with the spirit stones and was deliberately trying to scare him, or if she really had the ability and wasn't afraid of participating in this competition. If it was the former, Chu Feihu would definitely take out 500,000 spirit stones without hesitation. However, if it was the latter, then he would suffer a double loss. Bailey Hongzhuang's every step seemed to be stepping on Chu Feihu's heart, making him feel extremely conflicted. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang walked a few meters away, Chu Feihu's voice suddenly rang out. Good. I promise you. Hearing this answer, the corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a playful angle. 500,000 spirit stones, I've got it. Di Beichen, Wen Xiren, and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other and silently gave Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up in their hearts. This was really a good plan. Chapter 3149. This kind of good opportunity, if it was any other day, there would not be such a fool to cooperate. Chu Feihu did not believe that this fusion replenishing pill was refined by Bailey Hongzhuang. Others might not believe it either, but the few of them were very clear about the situation. All of these fusion replenishing pills were personally refined by Bailey Hongzhuang and were not obtained from other places. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly turned around with a bit of surprise in her eyes. She said, Master Chu, you have to consider it carefully. 500,000 spirit stones is not a small price. Chu Feihu, who was still a little worried about his original whereabouts, immediately calmed down after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. It seemed that his judgment was not wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang quoted this price just to scare him. Now that he had really agreed, the person who was afraid had become Bailey Hongzhuang. Thinking of this, Chu Feihu's answer became more and more certain. I've thought about it. 500,000 spirit stones. As long as you agree to compete with me in alchemy, I won't give you a single less. Steward Qin, then I'll have to trouble you to be a witness for this matter. Bailey Hongzhuang said. Steward Qin nodded repeatedly and said, No problem. I wonder when you plan to have this competition. It's better to do it today, Chu Feihu said without hesitation. Striking while the iron was hot, he could not give Bailey Hongzhuang a chance to go back on her words. Master Chu, are you sure you have 500,000 spirit stones in your Qiankuan bag right now? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and asked. Of course. Chu Feihu immediately counted his own Qiankuan bag, and then handed it over to Steward Qin. He said, Steward Qin, please count it. Is the 500,000 spirit stones in here correct? Steward Qin took the Qiankuan bag. This was related to the interests of Bailey Hongzhuang, so he could not make the slightest mistake. After counting the number, Steward Qin looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, Young Master D, there are indeed 500,000 spirit stones here. The number is not bad. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and took the Qingquan bag from Steward Qin's hands. She glanced at it and said, "All right, let's compete today." Everyone saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was so happy to participate in the competition after getting the spirit stones, and their minds couldn't come back to their senses for a while. Could it be that what they saw before was just an illusion? Since Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang, after all, if she did not have the strength, she would not dare to agree. Is this a... The situation seemed to have changed a little too quickly, making him unable to react for a moment. "You agreed?" Chu Feihu could not help but ask. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said, "That's right. The time and place are up to you." At this moment, although Chu Feihu's heart was beating like a drum, he had no choice but to do it. He had no room for regret. He could only brace himself. "Then let's do it today." Chu Feihu turned his head to look at Steward Qin and said, "Steward Qin, I need your help to arrange this place." Chapter 3150. Young Master D, Master Chu, you can go back and prepare first. I'll inform you after I've set up the venue. How about that? Steward Qin's face was filled with a satisfied smile. He had wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang's strength with his own eyes. Now that Chu Feihu had caused such a ruckus, it was undoubtedly the most suitable. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. "Then I'll wait for Steward Qin's notice." Immediately after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three did not stay any longer, and directly returned to the house. "Hongzhuang, you've really earned today." As soon as she walked into the house, Shengguan Yingying could not help but give Bailey Hongzhuang a thumbs up. 500,000 spirit stones was simply an unimaginable number. When they first arrived at Penglai Island, each newcomer only received 100 spirit stones. 500,000 spirit stones, the gap was simply too big. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly, and a thick smile appeared on her face. It's rare to find a rich spendthrift like Chu Feihu. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity to ruthlessly rip him off, it would be too wasteful. Moreover, we've wasted so much time on him before. If we don't collect some interest, we'll be letting ourselves down. This slash is really ruthless. Even I feel pain for Chu Feihu. Shengguan Yingying wrinkled her small nose. Even if Chu Feihu was an alchemist, it would take a lot of effort and time to earn 500,000 spirit stones. According to what you said, if we take back these 200,000 spirit stones, wouldn't he also feel pain? When Xiren said with a smile. Xiao He shook her head. Previously, except for us, almost everyone bet on Chu Feihu's victory. They shouldn't lose much in this bet. That's true. No matter what, we've made a profit. Just as everyone was happily discussing, Bailey Hongzhuang's face quietly revealed a serious expression. After the commotion caused by Chu Feihu, we've gotten quite the limelight this time. Even the people from the 100 Flowers Gate have noticed us. We need to keep a low profile in the future. Before our strength rises to the 5th level of the Purple Realm, it's best for us to cultivate in seclusion and reduce the chances of us going out. Fortunately, you've only exposed your medical and alchemy skills, so people won't pay too much attention to our strength, so there's no need to worry too much. Bewitching's voice was low, and his magnetic words were full of comfort for Bailey Hongzhuang. Back then, they had stayed on the 2nd floor, because they wanted to keep a low profile and cultivate. What happened after that made them feel helpless. It was not their original intention. Hongzhuang, you don't have to worry too much. When Xiren still had a carefree appearance. After Chu Feihu left the magic refining tower, our position in the Alchemist and Doctor District is basically unshakable. In my opinion, even if those alchemists and doctors don't think of ways to curry favor with us, they definitely won't dare to cause trouble for us. Overall, this isn't a bad thing. The only thing we need to worry about is Steward Qin and the 2 alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate. Bewitching suddenly said. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. Their thoughts were exactly the same. Chapter 3151. Steward Qin was in a high position. He admired Bailey Hongzhuang. But he was not as afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang as the other cultivators were. The higher the value of Bailey Hongzhuang's performance, the more weight he had in Steward Qin's heart. In other words, the more benefits Steward Qin could obtain from her. If Bailey Hongzhuang had enough strength and confidence, then the relationship between him and Steward Qin would be a win-win situation. However, once Steward Qin discovered that Bailey Hongzhuang did not have such strength and confidence, then they would be easily controlled by Steward Qin and become his lackeys. This was obviously not what they wanted, but once the two sides had a conflict, it would not be easy for them to escape from Steward Qin's control. Therefore, the best situation for them right now was to escape from Steward Qin's line of sight. As for how to do this, they needed to pay more attention to it. The best way is to reach a balance between the Demon Refining Pagoda and the 100 Flowers Gate. Once there is an effect of restraining each other, we will be much safer. Bewitching said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Fortunately, 100 Flowers Gate appeared today. Otherwise, if Steward Qin was the only one, I'm afraid it would be troublesome. Chu Feihu was a lion in the Demon Refining Pagoda, and as long as they did not follow his wishes, they would attract trouble. However, Steward Qin was also a tiger, and previously, both sides were fighting against each other. Bailey Hongzhuang had never thought of breaking this balance, but unfortunately, Chu Feihu was the first to make things difficult for her, so she had no choice but to kick Chu Feihu out. Once Chu Feihu was eliminated, then Steward Qin would be the biggest. If she wanted to protect herself, she would have to use her brain. After hearing the conversation between Bewitching and Shangguan Yingying, when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying also understood that they had already thought about the matter so deeply. However, after being reminded, they also realized that the problem was indeed not to be underestimated. However, it's still early. Even if Chu Feihu leaves the Magic Refining Tower, Steward Qin won't immediately turn his target to us. Bewitching saw that everyone's expressions had quietly become nervous, and couldn't help but comfort them. They did not have any foundation in Penglai Island, so they were always walking on thin ice. However, most of the cultivators in Penglai Island were like this, so this was not a big deal. As long as they were careful not to be caught by others, they would not be so easily manipulated. Forget it. Let's focus on what's in front of us. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. In just a short 2 hours, Steward Qin had already prepared the place. Not only that, Steward Qin had also informed the cultivators of the Demon Refining Tower that interested cultivators could pay 10 spirit stones to enter and take a look. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 found out about this, they couldn't help but sigh. This Steward Qin was indeed a profiteer. Even in this kind of competition, he didn't forget to earn some spirit stones. Speaking of which, the reason why this competition could be held was because Chu Feihu had spent a lot of money. Now that Steward Qin had actually collected the entrance fee, Chu Feihu's expression would definitely be very interesting after knowing all of this. Chapter 3152. The venue for the alchemy competition was set on the 15th floor. Steward Qin had directly rearranged the arena for the alchemy competition. The surrounding spectator stands were all ready-made, which was undoubtedly very convenient. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 arrived, they found that the entire spectator stand was already full. There were also many cultivators standing outside. It was extremely lively. Obviously, this alchemy competition had successfully attracted everyone's curiosity. Therefore, everyone was willing to pay the entrance fee to watch the show. This was Chu Feihu's last hope. Although everyone felt that Chu Feihu had no hope of turning things around, it was worth it to be able to witness Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills. Look, Bei is already here. Look at his face. He doesn't look afraid at all. In my opinion, he has a card up his sleeve. Chu Feihu's insistence on participating in this alchemy competition is completely superfluous. It would be better to keep the 500,000 spirit stones and find a better place to work after leaving. Sometimes, he won't give up until he reaches the Yellow River. Chu Feihu has been in the Demon Refining Tower for many years. Now, he is actually going to be chased out by a rising star. One can imagine the unhappiness in his heart. When Chu Feihu arrived near the arena, he heard such remarks. His expression immediately turned ugly, but he could only silently endure it. Master, look. Every time Chu Feihu appears, he's always surrounded by a group of alchemists and doctors. Now he's actually the only one who's come. This situation is truly somewhat desolate. It's a pity. Xiaohei looked at Chu Feihu's gloomy face as he walked over. She could not help but sigh faintly. He was already so old, yet he had still ended up in this state. It was really a pity. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Chu Feihu indifferently and said, "This world is so cruel, especially in a place like the Demon Refining Tower. Everyone only cares about their own interests. The so-called affection is just a pretense." Although those alchemists and doctors had always followed Chu Feihu's lead, they were actually on their own. Their minds were only thinking about how to better develop themselves. Speaking of which, with Chu Feihu's personality, I'm afraid that these people have a lot of resentment in their hearts. This kind of situation is really not strange. A pitiful person must have a detestable side. Xiaobai sighed. When Chu Feihu felt Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, he couldn't help but look back. The viciousness and coldness in his eyes couldn't be more obvious. If he could, he really wanted Bailey Hongzhuang to die. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly retracted her gaze. In her heart, she knew that Chu Feihu really hated her. Compared to the grudges between Lu Mingxiu and them, Chu Feihu truly hated her. She also had to be more careful in the future. Although the strength of an alchemist was not comparable to a cultivator, the methods of an alchemist were often impossible to guard against. If Chu Feihu was bent on dealing with her, then he would definitely cause her a lot of trouble. After seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu had arrived, Steward Qin, who was sitting at the front of the stands, also stood up and took the lead to walk to the arena. Chapter 3153. The purpose of this alchemy competition is to prove whether young Master D is really an alchemist, and whether the pills refined by young Master D have an effect that surpasses that of ordinary pills. As long as young Master D proves these 2 points, Master Chu will leave the Demon Refining Tower today. Otherwise, young Master D will leave the Demon Refining Tower. When Chu Feihu heard Steward Qin keep saying the word leave, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Steward Qin was usually smiling at him, but now that Di Bei had appeared, he was already thinking of ways to kick him away. He really couldn't swallow this resentment. If he could, he really wanted to tear Steward Qin and Di Bei apart. Unfortunately, he no longer had the power he had back then. In addition, all the viewing fees collected today will be given to the winner. As Steward Qin's voice fell, a hint of surprise flashed across Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. She didn't expect that Steward Qin would actually give this income to the winner. Wasn't this the same as giving it to her? Steward Qin is taking the initiative to express his goodwill to you. Di Beichen's voice rang in Bailey Hongzhuang's ears. He should have seen that you care a lot about spirit stones. And if he directly gives you spirit stones without a name, this method can be justified to express his goodwill to you. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head. I see. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other. Ever since the previous conversation made them realize how powerful Steward Qin was, they felt that this show of goodwill was not a good thing. As the saying goes, one's mouth is short when one eats from others. After receiving benefits, one had to remember some favors. Master Chu, how do you want to compete in this competition? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Chu Feihu in front of her. Since Chu Feihu had offered 500,000 spirit stones, she naturally should show her generosity. Whether it was the time, place, or method of the competition, she left them all to Chu Feihu to decide. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang so calmly leave the question to him to decide, Chu Feihu's heart became even more unhappy. This undoubtedly showed how rude he was before, but at this point, it was useless for him to think about it anymore. Let's not compete in anything else. Let's compete in the refining of the fusion replenishing pill. Chu Feihu said. He also had enough pride, and did not intend to use this competition to make Bailey Hongzhuang suffer any losses. He just wanted to witness how Bailey Hongzhuang refined the fusion replenishing pill with his own eyes. After Chu Feihu decided on the content of the competition, the eyes of Steward Qin and the 2 alchemists of the 100 Flowers sect also lit up. They were originally very curious about how Bailey Hongzhuang did it. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to show the refining method in front of all of them, didn't that mean that the secret to improving the effect of the medicinal pill was right in front of their eyes? Obviously, everyone present thought of this, and their eyes immediately focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. They just didn't know if Bailey Hongzhuang would agree to such a request. Hongzhuang, can't you agree to this? Although Shangguan Yingying was a layman, she also knew the huge value of this secret. It must not be easily grasped by others. We can make a request to refuse, or we can only refine a fusion replenishing pill with ordinary effects. Chapter 3154. Alright, let's compete in the refining of the fusion replenishing pill. Bailey Hongzhuang's handsome face was filled with confidence. She was calm and unperturbed. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang agree so easily, everyone couldn't help but be surprised. Logically speaking, she shouldn't be so happy. Steward Qin and the two alchemists of the 100 Flowers sect also had a hint of doubt in their eyes. For a moment, they couldn't understand why Bailey Hongzhuang agreed so confidently. Only Bailey Hongzhuang knew in her heart that she had already guessed that Chu Feihu would most likely compete with her in refining the fusion replenishing pill. Therefore, she had prepared the materials well after returning to her room. She believed that even if she were to refine it in front of everyone, no one would be able to see any clues. Although the alchemists of the 100 Flowers sect were powerful, she was still a step ahead. This was the wisdom of 1,000 years ago. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu both took out their alchemy furnaces. At their level, they would use their own alchemy furnaces to refine pills. So Steward Qin didn't need to prepare these at all. Bailey Hongzhuang directly placed the medicinal ingredients needed to refine the fusion replenishing pill on the table at the side, and then looked at Chu Feihu indifferently. After Chu Feihu had prepared everything, he also glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and confirmed that there was no problem with Bailey Hongzhuang's medicinal ingredients. I announce that the alchemy competition will now begin. As soon as Steward Qin's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu both began to refine immediately. The entire arena was very quiet. Everyone's eyes were focused on Bailey Hongzhuang and Chu Feihu. Alchemists had always been a very powerful existence in the eyes of cultivators, and this level of alchemy competition was not something that could be seen everywhere. What interested everyone the most was how Bailey Hongzhuang managed to refine the fusion replenishing pill with such an effect. Bewitching and the other two came to the stands after Bailey Hongzhuang started the competition. Steward Qin had already prepared seats for them in the first row of the stands, so they could see all the details clearly. After Bailey Hongzhuang made her move, those who were knowledgeable had already determined the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang as an alchemist. There was no need to doubt this point. One medicinal ingredient after another was placed into the alchemy furnace by Bailey Hongzhuang. The rising flames immediately wrapped around the medicinal ingredient. The medicinal ingredient quickly withered, leaving only its essence. Under the control of Bailey Hongzhuang, the flame was sometimes big and sometimes small. It was always able to burn all the impurities without losing the slightest bit of essence. Bailey Hongzhuang had been able to refine level 5 medicinal pills for a long time. Now that her strength had increased, whether it was her mental strength or her control, it could not be mentioned in the same breath. Thus, refining level 5 medicinal pills could be said to be a walk in the park, without the slightest bit of obscurity or stagnation. After everyone saw the process of Bailey Hongzhuang refining the Dan, it was as natural as moving clouds and flowing water. Their eyes were filled with amazement. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, Chu Feihu, who was on the other side, was not so carefree when refining medicinal pills. He was clearly a little nervous, and his face was also tense. He carefully paid attention to the flame in the alchemy furnace, not daring to be distracted in the slightest. Chapter 3155. As long as one was careless, the slightest mistake in the heat would cause the pill to fail. The higher the grade of the pill, the greater the possibility of failure. Furthermore, the medicinal ingredients consumed by high-grade pills were often very precious. Once the refinement failed, the loss would not be small. If one failed many times, then even a rich alchemist might not be able to bear it. As an alchemist, if Chu Feihu could succeed every time he refined a pill, then he would naturally earn a lot. However, he had wasted a lot of medicinal ingredients over the years. So even though he had stayed in the Devil Training Tower for so many years, he still felt the pinch when he said that he had to take out 500,000 spirit stones. Bailey Hongzhuang did not know what level of alchemist Chu Feihu was, but from Chu Feihu's performance, she could still determine that Chu Feihu's alchemist level was not as good as hers. If Chu Feihu was the same level of alchemist as her, then he would not need to be so careful when refining the fusion replenishing pill. This was because when one's ability had already surpassed the grade of the pill, it would be much easier to refine it again. When Steward Qin and the two cultivators from the 100 Flowers sect saw Bailey Hongzhuang refining as she pleased, the surprise in their hearts became even stronger. If it was said that they were not sure of Bailey Hongzhuang's strength before, now that they saw this scene, they realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's ability was much stronger than they had imagined. This value had already exceeded their previous estimates. The two cultivators from the 100 Flowers sect had their eyes fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang's movements, not willing to miss a single detail. They wanted to find out the secret of her stronger medicinal pills from the process of Bailey Hongzhuang refining pills. If they could grasp this point, then their status would definitely be greatly improved. When Chu Feihu was refining this pill, he could not help but pay attention to Bailey Hongzhuang's movements. He did not dare to be distracted, and could only occasionally take the opportunity to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. However, with this look, Chu Feihu could not help but panic. Bailey Hongzhuang's performance was really too indifferent, and this kind of casual refining of Dan had always been his dream realm. But he had pursued it for so long, but had not achieved it. But it was achieved by such a young boy like Bailey Hongzhuang. His heart's complexity and shock could be imagined. When he thought of how he had been saying that Bailey Hongzhuang was a fledgling, his face could not help but heat up. As an alchemist, what everyone valued was not age but attainments in alchemy. If an alchemist's alchemy skills were strong, then no matter how young they were, everyone would call them grandmaster. On the contrary, if their alchemy skills were not outstanding enough, then no matter how old they were, they would not be able to obtain everyone's respect. Chu Feihu did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills to be so strong at such a young age. If he had known earlier, he definitely would not have provoked Bailey Hongzhuang. Unfortunately, no amount of gold could buy it. If he had known earlier, he was afraid that he would have lost completely this time. Bailey Hongzhuang focused on refining. Since she had transmigrated, she had participated in several alchemist competitions. As her strength increased, these competitions no longer had any effect on her. Chapter 3156. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's refining method, the dissatisfaction the Demon Training Tower's alchemists and doctors had towards Bailey Hongzhuang gradually turned into admiration. No wonder Chu Feihu was defeated by Bailey Hongzhuang, because the latter's strength was really amazing. Not only Chu Feihu, but none of them were Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent. After understanding all this, everyone felt some regret. With Bailey Hongzhuang's ability, if she really wanted to seize their market, then they simply couldn't compare. On the contrary, Bailey Hongzhuang only took out a healing pill to sell, which already proved that she didn't have any intention of monopolizing the market. In the end, the reason why they were in such a situation was entirely their responsibility. If they really aroused Bailey Hongzhuang's anger, then in the future, the cultivators of the Devil Training Pagoda would all rush to buy from Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. Then they would only be able to share the rest of Bailey Hongzhuang's share. Compared to before, this situation was much more difficult for him to move forward. During the process of alchemy, Chu Feihu couldn't help but want to watch Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy process. In his mind, he always wondered if Bailey Hongzhuang could maintain such a state. He was even more curious about the effect of the fusing supplement pills refined by Bailey Hongzhuang. Was it because of Bailey Hongzhuang's superb technique? Or was it because of Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy recipe? Chu Feihu's alchemy skills hadn't reached Bailey Hongzhuang's level, and now that he was distracted, he was caught off guard. Hearing a muffled groan from the alchemy furnace, Chu Feihu's face suddenly became ugly. An unpleasant burning smell came from Chu Feihu's alchemy furnace, and his herbs directly turned into slag under the flames. Looking at this sudden scene, everyone's face couldn't help but become excited. Chu Feihu had been so determined to participate in this alchemy competition in order to make a comeback. He didn't expect that the alchemy pill would fail. How could he make a comeback? It seems that Chu Feihu has to leave the demon training tower today. How can he compete with Di Bei if he fails in alchemy in front of everyone? Chu Feihu was already flustered when he saw Di Bei start alchemy. He couldn't afford to lose at all. It's normal for him to fail in alchemy. It can only be said that Chu Feihu kicked an iron plate this time. Over the years, many alchemists have been bullied by him, but no one had the ability to make a comeback. Therefore, Chu Feihu is becoming more and more intense. I didn't expect Di Bei to appear and rewrite the situation. How can you not wet your shoes? Your shoes is shoes? This situation should have been expected. It was just a matter of time. Everyone sighed faintly. Chu Feihu's momentum was obviously gone. No matter how he struggled, it was useless. After Sheng Guanying saw that Chu Feihu's alchemy pill had failed, the corners of her lips could not help but curl into a mocking smile. This old fellow is completely at his wits' end now. When Hong Zhuang finishes refining the pill, I'll see what else he has to say. Chu Feihu has already expected the result. Look at his face. When Ziren raised his eyebrows, he no longer has the mood to refine it again. Chapter 3157. After Chu Feihu failed to refine the pill, he stared blankly at his alchemy furnace for a moment. A hint of struggle flashed in his eyes, but he immediately put away the alchemy furnace. Seeing this scene, Steward Qin couldn't help but stand up. A hint of surprise appeared on his face as he said, "Master Chu, what are you doing?" "I don't need to refine it again. I want to watch Di Bei refine the pill." Chu Feihu said, "If you don't refine the pill, doesn't that mean that you admit that you have failed in this alchemy competition?" Steward Qin couldn't help but ask. Chu Feihu glanced coldly at Steward Qin. "As long as Di Bei can refine a pill with such an effect, I will lose." Seeing this, Steward Qin nodded. "Since you already have a plan in your heart, then let's do it this way." Chu Feihu walked down the stage and stood below the stage to watch Bailey Hongzhuang's refining process. However, with this look, Chu Feihu couldn't help but turn pale with fright. This was because he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang had unknowingly become much faster than him. Just now, he had only refined 7 kinds of medicinal herbs. Bailey Hongzhuang had already refined 11 kinds of medicinal herbs. How was this possible? Previously, he had only noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's indifferent attitude when refining the pill. He had not noticed the speed of Bailey Hongzhuang's refining speed at all. However, after observing it now, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's speed was even more terrifying. As everyone knew, the higher the grade of the pill, the longer it would take to refine it. Most of the time was spent on refining the medicinal herbs. If Bailey Hongzhuang's refining speed was so fast, then she would undoubtedly save a lot of time compared to others. At this moment, Chu Feihu couldn't help but think of the 30 nourishing pills that Bailey Hongzhuang had taken out earlier. Could it be that these were really refined by Bailey Hongzhuang in 3 days? He had never believed that Bailey Hongzhuang was a real alchemist. One of the reasons was that Bailey Hongzhuang had taken out 30 fusion replenishing pills and claimed that she had refined them within 3 days. He simply did not believe that any alchemist could refine pills so quickly. Now that he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's speed, he suddenly felt that it was not impossible. On the contrary, it was very possible. His body was a little cold, and Chu Feihu's back was already cold. He really couldn't believe that the gap between him and Bailey Hongzhuang was so big. It was a bit too frightening. Chu Feihu was not the only one who had noticed this. The 2 alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate had also noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's extraordinary speed when refining pills. The 2 of them were also shocked. Her refining speed is so fast. Logically speaking, it should be impossible to refine the impurities in the medicinal herbs in such a short time. I've watched for so long, but I can't see anything special about her refining process. Could it be that the effect of her fusion replenishing pills surpasses that of ordinary fusion replenishing pills, and her refining speed have something to do with it? We can't be sure at the moment. Let's make a judgment after watching everything. In short, this D-Bay's attainments in alchemy are not simple. We have to go back and report it. If we can recruit D-Bay to our 100 Flowers Gate, you and I will definitely be rewarded handsomely. Chapter 3158. Just as everyone was in awe of Bailey Hongzhuang's alchemy skills, only Bailey Hongzhuang herself knew that the reason why her speed of refining medicinal ingredients could be greatly increased was because of her icy cold fire. After obtaining the icy cold fire, she realized that not only could this fire be used to great effect when fighting against enemies, but it could also greatly increase the speed of refining medicinal ingredients when refining medicinal pills. If it was an ordinary fire, these medicinal ingredients would need a certain amount of time to remove all the impurities. However, the icy cold fire was not an ordinary fire. It was a mysterious fire nurtured by nature, so its effect was naturally extraordinary. As long as any medicinal ingredient was enveloped by the icy cold fire, the impurities would be burned to ashes immediately. Even if there were some remaining impurities, they would only need some time to quickly dissipate into nothingness. Therefore, ever since Bailey Hongzhuang discovered the magical effect of the icy cold fire, she had been using it to refine medicinal pills. Once the impurities in the medicinal ingredients were removed, it would be easier to fuse them together. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang's success rate of refining medicinal pills had quietly increased by a lot. Ding! As Bailey Hongzhuang knocked on the furnace lid, a perfectly round medicinal pill jumped up, bringing with it a dense heat that had yet to dissipate into everyone's sight. At the same time, a strong medicinal fragrance spread out from the center of the furnace. Everyone could not help but take a deep breath, feeling comfortable all over. Bailey Hongzhuang waved the white porcelain bottle in her right hand and directly put the medicinal pill into the white porcelain bottle. Chu Feihu smelled the familiar medicinal fragrance, and his face turned ugly. His biggest hope had been completely destroyed. Bailey Hongzhuang was indeed a true alchemist, and the medicinal pill she had refined at this moment was undoubtedly the nourishing pill. After placing the medicinal pill on the table, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on Chu Feihu. Master Chu, I've refined this nourishing pill. Do you want to take a look? Hearing this, Chu Feihu immediately stepped onto the stage again. He walked up to Bailey Hongzhuang and picked up the white porcelain bottle. As soon as he opened the bottle, Chu Feihu smelled the rich fragrance. What made him feel strange was that the fragrance of this nourishing pill was even stronger than the ones he usually smelled. Just as Chu Feihu was testing the effects of this nourishing pill, the two alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate also stepped onto the stage. They also wanted to test if the nourishing pill that Bailey Hongzhuang had refined in front of them still had the same miraculous effects. All the cultivators present had their eyes fixed on the arena. They were also very curious about the final result. A moment later, the two alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate couldn't help but look at each other in disbelief. The pill's nourishing pill is indeed 20%. This is the nourishing pill's effect. So the winner of this year's alchemy is alchemy competition? After the result was announced, the two alchemists from the 100 Flowers Gate were still confused. They had seen the entire process. Just where was the secret? They did not find any clues at all. Chapter 3159. Really? All of this was real. Even though he had a premonition that all of this was real, when all of this really happened, he still found it hard to accept. He had used up all of his chips in exchange for slapping his face time and time again. If he had known earlier, he would have left cleanly from the beginning. At least this way, he would have been able to gain some respect from everyone. But now that he had left, he would be covered in dirt. At the very least, when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang again in the future, he wouldn't even be able to raise his head. After the announcement of the results, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up. This trouble had finally been completely resolved. Steward Qin gave Sweet Dream a look, and Sweet Dream immediately walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and said, "Young Master D, You have won the alchemy competition this time, so all the income from the tickets will belong to you. After I finish counting the number of tickets, I will send the spirit stones to you." Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said, "Thank you very much. I'll have to trouble you to thank Steward Qin for me." "All right." Sweet Dream stood beside Bailey Hongzhuang with an excited smile on her face. She really didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be so powerful. Not only was she an alchemist, but she was also an alchemist whose strength surpassed Chu Feihu's. Wasn't this the person she had been fantasizing about? Although she and Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't confirmed anything, she couldn't help but feel excited when she thought about how she was very close to Bailey Hongzhuang in the entire demon training tower. She could even feel that Steward Qin's gaze towards her and Bailey Hongzhuang had a different meaning. If she could really be together with Bailey Hongzhuang, then her status would really rise. Bailey Hongzhuang turned around and saw that Chu Feihu was still standing there with a pale face. It was obvious that his mind was numb, and he didn't know what to do at all. "Master Chu, since you like this pill so much, then I'll give it to you. By the way, thank you for your 500,000 spirit stones. I've been tight on money recently. You've helped me solve my urgent need." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Chu Feihu felt a burst of anger in his chest and couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He had lived proudly for so many years, and this was the first time he had lost face to such a level. He was already furious in his heart, and now he couldn't bear it when he heard Bailey Hongzhuang's ridicule. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Hongzhuang Zhuang's Bailey Hongzhuang's expression changed slightly. She didn't think that Chu Feihu's psychological endurance would be so weak. It was obvious that he was so angry that he couldn't control himself. This old man's tolerance is really bad. He can't even take this little bit of ridicule. I'm worried about how he'll survive on Penglai Island. Xiaobai shook his head and sighed. When he thought of the contempt and ridicule his master had experienced over the years, what Chu Feihu had to endure was really nothing. He can't bear the consequences. The more he pays, the less he can afford to lose. It's a pity that he caused this, Xiren said. Forget it, let's go. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was normal. She didn't want to judge Chu Feihu. Now that things had come to this, no one could blame anyone. Chapter 3160. The competition was already over, so Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three didn't stay any longer. They believed that Steward Qin would take care of this matter properly. No matter how unwilling Chu Feihu was to leave, Steward Qin wouldn't give him the slightest chance to stay. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three left, the other cultivators also left. The good show was over, but they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. From today onwards, an alchemist with deep roots in the demon training tower would completely disappear from this place and be replaced by a young alchemist who was even stronger than the alchemist. Not long after returning to the room, the two alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate found Bailey Hongzhuang. They didn't ask Bailey Hongzhuang about the secret of refining the fusion replenishing pill. They only repeatedly invited Bailey Hongzhuang to go to the 100 Flowers Gate and gave many tempting conditions. Clearly, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang was willing to go to the 100 Flowers Gate, the treatment and benefits would be much better than in the Devil Training Tower. However, Bailey Hongzhuang still declined in the end because she still had her own things to do in the Devil Training Tower. In order to not let the two alchemists of the 100 Flowers Gate become hostile, Bailey Hongzhuang directly stated that she wanted to go to the Devil Training Island and would only leave after everything was over. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's answer, the two alchemists finally understood. The alchemists who could come to Penglai Island were not only good at alchemy, but their own cultivation was also not bad. Previously, they didn't understand why Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to stay on the Devil Training Island. Now they finally understood. This was the only reason that made sense. Young Master D, after you leave the Devil Training Tower, you must come to our 100 Flowers Island. Our 100 Flowers Gate welcomes you at any time. Thank you. I have long heard that the 100 Flowers Gate is a holy land for alchemists and doctors. If I have the chance, I will definitely go. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Then we will take our leave first. I hope we can meet again on the 100 Flowers Island in the future. Definitely. After Bailey Hongzhuang sent the two alchemists away, she returned to the house. She could feel that part of the two alchemists really wanted to invite her, and the other part was afraid that they wanted to explore her secrets. If she didn't have the Chaos Ring, going to the 100 Flowers Gate to see the methods of other alchemists would be a good choice. However, with the Chaos Ring, she wasn't in a hurry. In comparison, the inheritance of the Devil Training Tower was more interesting. Moreover, the 100 Flowers Gate was no ordinary organization. Her unique traits would definitely give her a certain status in the 100 Flowers Gate. But that was under the premise that she told the 100 Flowers Gate everything. Otherwise, the situation would be even worse. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had just sent away the two pill masters from 100 Flowers Gate when Sweet Dream arrived. Lord D, this is the income from the tickets. It's all here. Sweet Dream handed a Qingquan pouch to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang took the Qingquan bag and put it away without looking. She smiled and said, "Thank you. Young Master D, do you plan to go to the 100 Flowers Gate now?" Bailey Xiuyi asked hesitantly. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Bailey Xiuyi. She understood that Steward Qin had asked Bailey Xiuyi to ask. Chapter 3161. You think I'll go to the 100 Flowers Gate? Bailey Hongzhuang asked with a faint smile. Sweet Dream's expression revealed a bit of awkwardness. The 100 Flowers Gate is indeed very attractive to alchemists. Most of the alchemists and doctors on Penglai Island are gathered at the 100 Flowers Gate, so I think you might go there as well. I'm not sure if I'll go to the 100 Flowers Gate in the future, but I don't plan on going for now, Bailey Hongzhuang said frankly. As soon as he said this, a smile immediately appeared on Sweet Dream's face. Really? That's great. Seeing Sweet Dream so happy, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look surprised. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Sweet Dream in confusion. Sweet Dream also noticed that she seemed to be a little too obvious. She immediately blushed and said, "Young Master D, I still have things to do at the counter, so I'll be leaving first." Her voice fell, and before Bailey Hongzhuang could speak, Sweet Dream had already trotted away. "Master, it's over this time. You've performed too well. You've completely captured Sweet Dream's heart." Xiaohei sighed. Sweet Dream was a pretty good girl, but it was a pity that her master was a woman, and a married woman at that. Xiren also shook his head and sighed. She's going to fall deeper and deeper. Sweet Dream already has feelings for Hongzhuang, and Hongzhuang's performance today was so outstanding. She's probably already the target of many girls. It's not strange that Sweet Dream's feelings for her are even deeper. Shen Guanning analyzed. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Xiren and the others. Do you really think Sweet Dream likes me? Isn't it obvious? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen. Di Beichen also nodded. I wasn't sure last time, but I'm sure this time. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, if that's really the case, then I have to make Sweet Ming stop thinking about me as soon as possible. Otherwise, it won't be good if she keeps wasting her time on me. Every relationship was beautiful. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't want to delay Sweet Dream's youth because of her own selfish desires. Sweet Dream was obviously a woman who grew up on Penglai Island. She wanted to find a good man to change her life. Since he couldn't be the right person for Sweet Dream, it would be better to let Sweet Dream find someone else as soon as possible. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen and the others looked at each other and nodded. Sweet Dream's love for Bailey Hongzhuang could indeed help them a little, but they wouldn't let Sweet Dream fall deeper for such a small matter. After this matter came to an end, Chu Feihu quickly left Demon Refining Island. At this point, even if Bailey Hongzhuang allowed him to continue staying on Demon Refining Island, he didn't have the face to stay. After losing Chu Feihu, the alchemists and doctors thought for a long time and couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. In their opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang drove Chu Feihu away because she wanted to replace him, so they all went to find Bailey Hongzhuang. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's reaction was beyond their expectations. Bailey Hongzhuang directly said she wasn't interested and drove them away. She had no interest in replacing Chu Feihu, because she didn't plan on staying in Demon Refining Tower for long. Chapter 3162. The demonic training pagoda's alchemists and doctors obviously didn't think that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such an attitude. Suddenly, they couldn't come back to their senses. However, Bailey Hongzhuang simply didn't want to explain to them. She just threw out a sentence and went into seclusion. With an income of 700,000 spirit stones, Bailey Hongzhuang directly dispelled the idea of selling healing pills. These spirit stones were enough to support their cultivation. There was no need to spend time to make healing pills. While Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were cultivating in seclusion, the cultivators of the Devil Training Pagoda were constantly looking for Bailey Hongzhuang, only wanting to ask for medicine. Everyone's thoughts were simple. Since the effect of Bailey Hongzhuang's pill was 20% stronger than ordinary pills, then the other pills that Bailey Hongzhuang refined would have the same effect. In this way, if Bailey Hongzhuang personally refined some Dan that could help increase the probability of a breakthrough, the effect would be greatly improved, and the probability of a breakthrough would increase again. This was simply a great thing. Breaking through was what every cultivator hoped for the most. However, the existence of bottlenecks made it difficult for them to break through. As long as it could increase the chances of breaking through, everyone was willing to pay the price. When Bailey Hongzhuang was in seclusion, no one could find Bailey Hongzhuang, so they could only place all their hopes on Sweet Dream. This was because they had heard that Sweet Dream and Bailey Hongzhuang were very close. Sweet Dream felt helpless and happy at the same time. Every day, the counter she was at became the busiest counter. "Miss Sweet Dream, help me ask young Master D. I only want this pill. I can accept any price. Miss Sweet Dream, help me convey my thoughts. I'm willing to pay a higher price." Miss Sweet Dream. Sweet Dream nodded and said, "I've already remembered your intentions. As long as young Master D comes out of seclusion, I'll definitely tell him this news. As for whether he'll accept it or not, I can't guarantee that. Miss Sweet Dream, with your relationship with young Master D, as long as you're willing to put in a good word for me, wouldn't it be very easy?" Sweet Dream shook her head. "Young Master D is wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. I'm afraid he doesn't have time to help you refine pills." She knew very well that Bailey Hongzhuang was different from other alchemists. Other alchemists were wholeheartedly focused on refining pills. As long as the other party could pay the price, they were basically willing to help. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's focus was clearly on cultivation. Otherwise, she wouldn't go cultivate whenever she had the time. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were oblivious to what was happening outside. Now, as long as they left the house, they would be targeted. There was an endless stream of people asking for medicine, so they chose to stay in the house. As long as they closed the door, no one would disturb them. The days in the oceanic world were undoubtedly much more boring. Everyone had been cultivating and dealing with demon beasts. However, they all knew that cultivation itself was a boring thing. They needed enough patience. Chapter 3163. Seeing that Bewitching had successfully broken through, everyone was overjoyed. Due to the effects of the cursed physique, Bewitching's cultivation speed had been greatly reduced. Fortunately, he wasn't stuck at the same level forever. In the end, he had successfully broken through. After successfully breaking through, the smile on Bewitching's face grew wider. In fact, due to his physique, Bewitching was also under a lot of pressure. It was just that he had never shown it before. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two understood Bewitching very well. They could also feel that Bewitching was exceptionally fierce when dealing with the monster. It was obvious that he was venting all his anger on the monster. It was precisely because of this constant fighting and wandering on the edge of danger that Bewitching found the opportunity to break through. If this continues, it won't be long before we successfully break through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm. When Xiren's face was filled with a faint smile, they had only been on Penglai Island for a few months, but their cultivation was already not far from the 5th level of the Purple Realm. This speed of improvement was really satisfying. Now they finally understood why so many cultivators wanted to come to Penglai Island to cultivate. It was because the abundant cultivation resources here could help them break through quickly. If they continued to stay in the outside world without the help of spirit stones, they would need to spend a lot more time. So far, there hasn't been any news from the auction. I don't know when we'll be able to find the last Frostfire tier. Shangguan Yingying frowned. They had already been on Penglai Island for half a year. Di Beichen's physique couldn't suppress it for long. If they continued to delay like this, it would undoubtedly be extremely bad. However, obtaining a purple dragon emperor ginseng in half a year was also a good harvest. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's expression became more serious. According to my estimation, I will be able to break through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm in about 10 days. You should be able to break through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm soon. Shangguan Yingying nodded. Almost. It should be around 10 days. This way, we won't have to worry too much about appearing in front of others with our true appearances. If we still can't get any information from the Demon Training Tower, we'll head to Penglai Island and ask the Golden Flame Auction House for information. This matter had been hanging in Bailey Hongzhuang's mind for a long time. As the time approached, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others felt an increasingly strong sense of oppression. When they thought of the situation where Di Beichen fell into a coma, their hearts sank to the bottom. They did not want to experience that situation again. Let's set off after we break through. Regardless of who the Golden Flame Auction House is helping, as long as we think of a way, we might be able to obtain it, Xiren said solemnly. They were already prepared. No matter what the other party wanted them to exchange for, as long as it was something they could do, they would not hesitate to exchange for it. I'll go ask Steward Qin again. If he can help us contact him, that would be great. If they were to rashly go to the Golden Flame Auction House, the person in charge might not even pay attention to them. If Steward Qin were to appear on their behalf, then the situation would undoubtedly be much better. At the very least, they would be standing on the same level as they talked, which was far better than them. Chapter 3164. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others retreated from the Chaos Ring, they saw the note that Sweet Dream had stuffed into the door. Bailey Hongzhuang opened it and raised her eyebrows slightly. Speaking of which, it's really a coincidence. I was just about to look for Steward Qin, but he actually took the initiative to look for me. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the expressions of Wen Xiren and the other two changed slightly. I wonder why Steward Qin is looking for you. I don't know. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged. You'll know when you get there. Ever since the last incident, I felt that Steward Qin would come to look for you. It's been so long since he came. This Steward Qin is already very patient. Di Beichen said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. You mean Steward Qin is interested in my alchemy skills? Di Beichen nodded. If I'm not wrong, this Steward Qin probably thought that you would take the lead to look for him. So he has been waiting calmly. However, he has been waiting for too long. So he can only take the lead to look for you. However, it's a good thing for us that he took the initiative to make a move. Then let's go find Steward Qin now, and see what he wants to exchange with me. Bailey Hongzhuang blinked. If he wants to know the secret of my alchemy, maybe we can really use this as a bargaining chip to exchange for the tears of cold flame. Hongzhuang, the secret value of your alchemy is not ordinary. Wouldn't it be too much of a loss to tell Steward Qin like this? Shangguan Yingying frowned. No matter who it was, this was a losing deal. Steward Qin had taken too much advantage of this matter. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I just told him how to make a pill, that's all. Not to mention a pill formula, as long as it could be exchanged for the tears of cold flame, to remove the shackles on Di Beichen's body. No matter what Bailey Hongzhuang was willing to pay. After all, this feeling of being on tenterhooks, and worrying that Di Beichen would leave her at any time was too painful. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had already made a decision in her heart, Shangguan Yingying also nodded. In fact, she knew very well that even if she was Bailey Hongzhuang, she would definitely make the same choice. When Steward Qin saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had arrived, a thick smile immediately appeared on his face. This level of enthusiasm was obviously much stronger than the last time they met. Young masters, you're here. Please have a seat, please. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen sat down opposite Steward Qin. Steward Qin, I'm really sorry. We've been cultivating before, and didn't notice the news from Sweet Dream. After seeing it today, we immediately came over. Hearing this, the smile on Steward Qin's face became even wider. He said, It doesn't matter. I know that you guys are usually busy cultivating. It doesn't matter if you come to find me at any time. I wonder why Steward Qin is looking for me this time. Bailey Hongzhuang went straight to the point with a faint smile on her lips. Compared to the last time they negotiated with Steward Qin, their identities had changed a little this time. Steward Qin looked at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang and said, You guys drink tea first. Di Beichen picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Then he looked at Steward Qin indifferently, waiting for Steward Qin to speak first. Chapter 3165. Bailey Hongzhuang held the teacup in one hand, lifted the lid and took a sip. She looked at Steward Qin with an indifferent expression, waiting to hear what Steward Qin had to say next. Looking at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang's unhurried appearance, Steward Qin knew in his heart that these two fellows were really not in a hurry at all. They were just waiting for him to speak first in exchange for better conditions. However, he had no other choice now. To him, Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him was a gold mine. If Bailey Hongzhuang was willing to tell him the method to improve the effect of the pills, then he could use this to exchange for too many benefits. He believed that as long as it was an alchemist, they would not be able to ignore such benefits. At the same time, he also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely not reveal such a secret, so he could only start from other places. A win-win situation was also an excellent situation. Young Master D, I feel that if we join forces, you will refine the pills and my demon training tower will be responsible for selling them. We will definitely be able to sell them for a good price. When Steward Qin was speaking, his gaze had always been on Bailey Hongzhuang. He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had recently spent all her efforts on cultivation, but he also believed that there was no one who did not love money. Hearing Steward Qin's suggestion, Bailey Hongzhuang sighed in her heart. This suggestion was exactly what Di Beichen had expected. Thank you for Steward Qin's good intentions. Currently, I have enough spirit stones in my hands. For the time being, I don't have any thoughts of earning spirit stones. If they needed to buy other things, then the consumption of spirit stones would naturally be very fast. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three only used spirit stones to cultivate, which was enough. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang did not hesitate to reject his suggestion, Steward Qin could not help but speak out again. The sale I mentioned is not within the demon training tower, but to the other islands of Penglai Island. Young Master D, the effect of the pills you refined is much better than ordinary pills. Just this point alone is enough to attract the attention of many people. Not to mention some of the smaller islands, Penglai Island, 100 Flowers Island, and Scarlet Moon Island, will definitely be very interested in your pills. The price will definitely be very high, or you can sell them at the Golden Flame auction house. Not only will you be able to earn a lot of spirit stones, but it will also help to increase your influence. Your reputation will definitely become famous on Penglai Island very soon. This is a good opportunity. Why don't you think about it? Steward Qin's eyes were bright and fervent. He felt that no alchemist would refuse such a good opportunity. Becoming famous was the dream of many people. With the help of the magic training tower, it was much easier for Bailey Hongzhuang to achieve this than for others. These days, he had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would take the initiative to discuss these matters with him. He did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang would be so calm. After such a long time, he had no choice but to take the lead. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen could not help but look at each other after hearing all this. Then, they used their elemental energy to communicate with each other. Beichen, what do you think of Steward Qin's suggestion? If my name becomes famous in this Penglai Island, then wouldn't it be easier for us to collect the tears of frigid fire? Chapter 3166. Steward Qin should also want to use your pills to increase the influence of the magic training pagoda. Di Beichen thought for a while. Being famous does have some benefits, but there are also a lot of troubles that come with it. Wife, if it's for the sake of finding the tears of glacial flame, we have many ways to find them. There's no need to confine yourself for me. Once you agree, you'll need to concoct enough pills for a long time. Being famous was undoubtedly the greatest temptation for those who loved fame and fortune. However, Bewitching knew very well that Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about these things at all. Once Bailey Hongzhuang entered the eyes of the four great powers as an alchemist, it was inevitable that they would fight over her. At that time, Bailey Hongzhuang would be like a small boat, far from being as free and unfettered as she was now. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood what Bewitching meant. To her, alchemist was only one of her identities. What she really wanted to walk was still the path of cultivation. However, once she cooperated with Steward Qin, it would not be easy for her to continue on that path. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately made a decision. Steward Qin, thank you for your kind intentions, but for now, I just want to cultivate properly. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had actually rejected his suggestion, Steward Qin couldn't help but be stunned. His mind couldn't wrap itself around it, and he only suspected that he had heard wrongly. You don't agree? Steward Qin raised his voice and asked. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, confirming her answer. This time, Steward Qin couldn't help but feel anxious. He really didn't understand what Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking. She actually didn't agree to such a good opportunity? One had to know that there were countless alchemists in the magic training pagoda who were looking forward to such an opportunity. It was just that they were not capable enough to do so. Now that such a good opportunity was placed in front of Bailey Hongzhuang, she actually rejected it? Why? This won't do you any harm. Steward Qin frowned. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. To each his own. If you have any ideas about how to split it or other places, you can tell me. We can discuss all of this in detail. Steward Qin spoke again. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. Steward Qin, I don't have any opinions or dissatisfaction with these. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, but I don't have such plans for the time being. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang refused with such certainty, Steward Qin also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had really made up her mind to refuse. Even if he couldn't think of a reason for Bailey Hongzhuang to refuse, he could only choose to accept it now. Young Master D, why don't we talk about a deal instead of a collaboration? Steward Qin narrowed his eyes. No matter what, he couldn't let such a good opportunity slip away from his eyes. At the very least, he had to try again. I wonder what kind of deal Steward Qin wants to discuss. You sell me the method to improve the effect of your pills. No matter what the price is, as long as you say it, I will definitely do it. How about it? As soon as he finished speaking, Steward Qin's gaze was fixated on Bailey Hongzhuang's face, unwilling to miss any of the latter's expressions. Chapter 3167. Steward Qin nodded his head. I understand, but no matter what, there is a possibility that anything can happen. It's just that the price is satisfactory, isn't it? When he said these words, Steward Qin was also very uncertain in his heart. If it was him, he would probably not tell anyone about this secret even if he died. However, the feeling of having a treasure in front of him and only being able to look at it made his heart itch. What kind of conditions does Steward Qin think can be exchanged for my method? Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. Her delicate and handsome face had a faint smile as she looked at Steward Qin with a smile that was not a smile. Seeing this, Steward Qin was also a little confused for a moment. He thought for a while and said, You can put forward any conditions. As long as I can do it, there is no need to talk about money. Power is also fine. Or you have something that you want to do but are unable to do. Although my demon training pagoda's reputation is not as resounding as the four great powers, everyone in the know knows that our demon training pagoda's influence is definitely not inferior to any of the four great powers. On this Penglai Island, there are very few things that our demon training pagoda can't do. Although these words were extremely arrogant, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching both knew in their hearts that Steward Qin had the confidence to be arrogant. There was no doubt about the influence of the demon training pagoda. This was something that they had already known long ago. Her black and white phoenix eyes gradually lit up. The more confident Steward Qin was, the more surprised Bailey Hongzhuang was. Because of this, the possibility of Steward Qin helping her find the tears of cold flame was even greater. Steward Qin, whether or not this deal can be made, I have a condition. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Steward Qin originally did not have much hope for this deal. But after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, he could not help but be overjoyed. He hurriedly said, "What condition? Just say it." As long as the other party had a request, it proved that there was still a possibility of success. If Steward Qin can help me find the tears of cold flame, then I will discuss the other conditions of this deal with you. How about it? Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Steward Qin could not help but be stunned. He frowned and his eyes flashed with a deep sense of confusion. Blazing cold tears? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. This was the second time that Steward Qin had heard about the tears of cold flame from Bailey Hongzhuang's mouth. Last time, Bailey Hongzhuang had already taken away the purple dragon emperor ginseng from him. He had almost forgotten about this matter. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's prerequisite would be the tears of cold flame. I didn't expect young Master D to be so obsessed with the tears of cold flame. This is beyond my expectations. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. To be honest, I do need these tears of frigid flame to do something. If Steward Qin can help me find the tears of cold flame, then we can continue to discuss this deal. If we can't find it, then there's no need to discuss it. In the end, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice became more and more firm. She only wanted to obtain the tears of cold flame, and was willing to pay any price for it. As for the other fame and fortune, they were not attractive to her at all. Even though Steward Qin was very puzzled by Bailey Hongzhuang's request, he could only nod and agree at this moment. All right, I will think of a way to find the tears of cold flame. Chapter 3168. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen returned to the house, when Xiren and Shangguan Yingying came over, their faces were filled with curiosity as they asked, "How did your discussion go?" Steward Qin promised to work hard to help us find the tears of cold flame. I believe that as long as he can find it, he will definitely find it. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was filled with joy. The last time she talked to Steward Qin about this matter, Steward Qin obviously did not take it to heart. Today was different from the past. From Steward Qin's gaze, one could see his determination. Hearing this, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying could not help but look at Di Beichen. So everything is hopeful? Di Beichen nodded. With Steward Qin's ability, he should be able to do this. That's great. Shangguan Yingying heaved a sigh of relief. What they were most worried about was Di Beichen's physique. If the problem of his physique was solved, they would be able to wander around the Prunglai Island in peace. Before coming to the Prunglai Island, their goal was to find the violet dragon emperor ginseng and the tears of cold flame. Now they felt that it was a good choice to wander around the Prunglai Island and improve their cultivation. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes were filled with anticipation and joy. She only hoped that Steward Qin would not disappoint her. If he could really solve her biggest worry, then she would not be stingy with handing over some benefits to Steward Qin. After Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen left, Steward Qin immediately sent people to inquire about the whereabouts of the tears of cold flame. He did not know why Bailey Hongzhuang needed the tears of cold flame so much. If it was any other medicinal ingredient, he would only need to say a few words to collect it. However, this tears of cold flame was much more complicated. He knew that the Golden Flame auction house had been collecting this item before. Even the tears of cold flame in their Demon Training Tower's inventory had been exchanged by the Golden Flame auction house. Now he had to think of a way to get the tears of cold flame back. Thinking of this, Steward Qin could not help but sigh. If he had known earlier, he would not have handed over the tears of cold flame. Now there were so many more troubles. A few days later, the people who had gone to inquire about the news had returned. What did you say? The Golden Flame auction house said they don't have it? He frowned. He vaguely remembered that the auction house had collected a lot of tears of cold flame. How could they not have a single one of them? A helpless expression appeared on that person's face. The people from the Golden Flame auction house said that if it was something else, they would be able to take it out. However, they really don't have any more tears of frigid flame. They can only apologize. What do you want to talk to me? Steward sons. Steward Qin's face was filled with anger. The people of the Golden Flame auction house liked to talk nonsense with him. I have already emphasized to them that this is something that you need very much. However, they all said the same thing. They said that the auction house no longer has it. This old cunning man. It seems that I really have no choice but to do it myself. Steward Qin's gaze gradually deepened. With such a great opportunity, he definitely could not give it up just because of a tears of cold flame. As long as he grasped the method of refining pills for Bailey Hongzhuang, the four major forces would definitely need his help in the future. Thinking of that kind of scene, that was the result he wanted the most. Chapter 3169. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had been waiting for news from Steward Qin. So far, Steward Qin was their greatest hope. However, after waiting for several days without any results, everyone's mood was somewhat complicated. At this time, Sweet Dream rushed over and said, "Young Master D, I heard that the person who Steward Qin sent to inquire about the whereabouts of the tears of cold flame has returned. However, the result doesn't seem to be good." Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang had asked Sweet Dream to pay more attention to the whereabouts of the tears of cold flame, and Sweet Dream had also been paying attention to the movements of the auction house. However, although the Golden Flame auction house auctioned a lot of things every time, she had never seen the tears of cold flame. This time, when she heard that Steward Qin had helped to send someone to inquire about the tears of cold flame, Sweet Dream was naturally extremely concerned about this news. Hearing Sweet Dream's words, the hearts of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three sank. This was undoubtedly extremely bad news. If even Steward Qin was unable to find the tears of cold flame on Penglai Island, then with just the strength of the four of them, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Seeing the change in the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Sweet Dream hurriedly continued. However, not long after the person who inquired about the news returned, Steward Qin packed up his things and left the magic refining tower. Before he left, he even told us that he would temporarily leave for a period of time. If there's anything, we'll deal with it when he returns. In that case, Steward Qin personally went out to look for it? Shengguan Yingying asked. Sweet Dream nodded. It should be. I've stayed in the magic refining tower for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen Steward Qin personally go out to look for something. Normally, Steward Qin would stay in the magic refining tower most of the time, and if he needs to do something, he would instruct his subordinates to do it. Although she didn't know why Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three needed the tears of cold flame, Sweet Dream knew in her heart that this thing must be extremely important to them. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked Steward Qin to look for it. She only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three would be able to find it successfully. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at each other. A glimmer of hope reignited in their hearts. I hope that Steward Qin's personal intervention will be useful. Otherwise, this will be a bolt from the blue for us. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. Now Steward Qin was their only hope. Sweet Dream smiled. With Steward Qin's ability, there shouldn't be any problems. You can rest assured. After Sweet Dream left, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others didn't look happy at all. On the contrary, their expressions were heavy. This matter actually requires Steward Qin to personally take action. It seems that this is not an ordinary matter. When Xiren's eyes flashed with a light of contemplation, if it was easy, the person who went to investigate would have already brought back the tears of frigid flame. Beichen's eyes darkened slightly as he slowly said, since Steward Qin has chosen to personally take action, it proves that the tears of cold flame exist on Penglai Island. It's just that the other party is unwilling to take it out. That's right. As long as the tears of cold flame exist, we at least have some hope. The Black Phoenix eyes flashed with a deep and complex light. Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts were also extremely complicated. Once Steward Qin was unable to find the tears of cold flame, then it would be really difficult for them to solve Di Beichen's illness. Chapter 3170. While Steward Qin was out searching for the tears of cold flame, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were still in closed-door cultivation. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang had expected, 10 days later, she had successfully broken through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm, while Xiren and Shengguan Yingying had also broken through one after another. Not only them, but the three beasts had also broken through. In Xiren's words, these three beasts' talent in cultivation was not bad at all. If they were not beasts but humans, they would also be all-powerful figures. The three beasts were obviously very happy with Xiren's praise. Immediately their attitude towards Xiren improved a lot. As their master's contract beasts, they had extremely high requirements for themselves. However, Di Beichen's situation still did not change. According to him, he was still quite a distance away from breaking through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm. When Di Beichen broke through to the 4th level of the Purple Realm, he was already much later than Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Now that he wanted to break through to the 5th level of the Purple Realm, he would definitely need more time. Regarding this, everyone had already prepared themselves, so they did not find it strange. However, all of them could feel that Di Beichen was exceptionally diligent in his cultivation. His diligence and hard work made them feel ashamed, but at the same time, they also felt Di Beichen's determination. Even if he was suppressed by his physique, Di Beichen still wanted to do his best to improve. At the same time, Steward Qin had successfully arrived at Penglai Island. As soon as he got on the island, Steward Qin immediately rushed to his destination, the Golden Flame Auction House. When he thought of the old fox of the Golden Flame Auction House playing tricks on him, he felt a burst of anger. This guy had always been the kind of person who would not act without seeing a rabbit. Previously, he had sent someone here because the chips he had taken out were not enough. This time, he had personally come. He wanted to see what kind of request the other party had. When Steward Qin of the Golden Flame Auction House saw that Steward Qin had actually come personally, his face couldn't help but reveal a thick expression of surprise. "Steward Qin, you actually came personally?" Steward Qin was surprised. The matters of the Magic Refining Tower had always been extremely busy, so Steward Qin rarely left the Magic Refining Tower. He did not expect that Steward Qin would actually come to Penglai Island today. After all, most of the cultivators in the Magic Refining Tower were very powerful, and in such a place, there would often be cultivators who were out of control. If there was no Steward Qin, there would often be uncontrollable things that happened. "I sent someone to ask you, but you're not willing to agree. Doesn't that mean that I have to come personally?" Steward Qin slowly spoke, his words filled with displeasure. Seeing this, Steward Qin quickly he said, "Steward Qin, you are not angry first angry? Don't be angry. Let's have a cup of tea and have a rest before we talk. How about it?" Seeing Manager Jin's attitude, Steward Qin's expression became a little better. He followed Manager Jin to the reception of the Golden Flame Auction House. "Steward Qin, try this. This is the top-grade snow jade that I just bought. The taste is very good," Steward Qin said with a smile. Steward Qin took a sip of the tea and felt a strong fragrance coming from it. It was slightly bitter and sweet, and he couldn't help but nod his head and say, "Steward Qin really enjoys it. This is indeed a good tea." Chapter 3171. Steward Qin waved his hand. "You don't have to say these flattering words to me. You should be very clear about the purpose of my visit this time. Let's get straight to the point." As soon as he opened his mouth, Steward Qin went straight to the point. He didn't have the mood to waste too much time here. Looking at Steward Qin's anxious appearance, Steward Qin also sighed. "It's been so many years, but you're still the same. You really haven't changed at all. I've known you for so long. Do I have to be polite to you?" Steward Qin asked. "Since you've come in person, then I'll tell you the truth. I really can't give you the tears of cold flame," Steward Jean revealed a helpless expression as he slowly spoke. Hearing this, Steward Jean couldn't help but frown, and a hint of doubt appeared on his face. Why? It's just a medicinal ingredient. Previously, you took it away from my demon refining tower, but I've never seen you auction this tears of cold flame. No matter what the price is, just tell me directly. Don't come to me with these empty words. The helplessness on Steward Jin's face became even more intense as he said, I'm really not lying to you. If I could give it to you, I would have already asked him to bring it back when you sent someone over. With our many years of friendship, do I still need to play this game with you? You've played a lot of tricks with me over the years. Steward Jean mercilessly exposed him. As the steward of the Golden Flame Auction House, Steward Jin's job was to do business. Over the years, he had suffered a lot at the hands of Steward Jean. Compared to him, Steward Jean was the real profiteer. Every negotiation was bound to get the most benefits. After so many years, Steward Jean had already thoroughly understood this point. It was precisely because of this that he did not believe that Steward Jean had said that there was no hope at all. It was just that the chips he had taken out were not enough. After being mercilessly exposed by Steward Jean, Steward Jin's expression revealed a bit of embarrassment. However, in the end, he was an old fox who had been rolling around in the business world for many years. This bit of embarrassment was nothing to him, so he naturally ignored it. No matter what, we have been old friends for so many years. Aren't you not giving me face when you open your mouth? Steward Jean said helplessly. I know very well what kind of person you are. Don't talk to me about this nonsense. Just tell me how you can sell the tears of cold flame to me. Steward Jean waved his hand, and a look of impatience on his face. I can't leave the demon refining tower for too long. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if anything happened. And, seeing that Manager Jin's attitude had changed, Steward Jean also became serious. With his understanding of Manager Jean, this meant that he was really serious. Although I usually hold on to the other things, when you really need them, I will give them to you. However, I really can't give you the tears of cold flame. No matter what price you offer, it won't work. Manager Jin's voice was slightly heavy as he directly gave the answer. Chapter 3172. Even if you can't give me the tears of cold flame, you should at least tell me a reason. Steward Jean stared at Manager Jean with a serious and stubborn expression. If there was no reason, he would definitely not accept this result. Seeing that Steward Jean was so persistent about this matter, a hint of hesitation flashed across Manager Jin's face. After thinking for a moment, he said, I saw that the other party was you, so I told you the reason. However, you can't spread this reason. Steward Jean nodded. Don't worry. What's there for me to spread about this kind of thing? I collected the tears of cold flame for the people above. This is the mission they gave me. So I have been collecting the tears of cold flame all these years. Tell me, how can I give something that the higher-ups want to others? Unless I'm tired of living. Following Manager Jin's words, Steward Jean's expression couldn't help but change. He thought about it, but he never thought that it would be such a result. The tears of cold flame are actually wanted by the people above you? What do they want the tears of cold flame for? Steward Jean couldn't help but ask. Manager Jean spread out his hands and said, Usually, it's the higher-ups who say that they need something. So we help them collect it. Why would we ask why? If it wasn't something that the higher-ups needed, I would have given it to you long ago. However, the higher-ups are very clear about the situation of the tears of cold flame. If I gave it to you, then I wouldn't be able to explain it. We've been friends for so many years. I hope you can understand that it's not that I don't want to help you. Steward Jean's heart sank. He never thought that the tears of cold flame would be so rare. If he couldn't find the tears of cold flame, then there was no way for him to continue discussing this deal with Bailey Hongzhuang. This was undoubtedly the worst situation. Is there really no other way? Steward Jean did not give up and asked, Give the tears of cold flame in your hands to the higher-ups. Can you think of a way to help me get another set of tears of cold flame? Manager Jean shook his head. If I had a way, I would have told you long ago. There's really no other way. The tears of frigid flame are hard to come by. In order to complete the mission given to me by my superiors, I even sent people to search for them in the outside world. How could there be any extra? Hearing this, Steward Qin's expression became extremely ugly. He finally understood why Bailey Hongzhuang would treat the tears of cold flame as a prerequisite. It was because it was simply too difficult to obtain. If he couldn't obtain it with his ability, it would be even harder for Bailey Hongzhuang to find it with her own ability. Can you help me ask your superiors if it's possible for me to exchange something else for it? Manager Jean looked at Steward Qin's serious expression. He thought for a moment and said, I can help you ask, but the chances of success are not high. No matter what, help me ask first. As long as there's a little hope, it's good. Steward Qin sighed. He really didn't expect the real situation to be like this. It really made him feel helpless. Speaking of which, old Qin, why are you suddenly interested in the tears of cold flame? Manager Jean asked. I remember that when I went to your place to get the tears of cold flame, you still looked like you didn't care. Although the tears of cold flame is a very precious medicinal ingredient, there aren't many places to use it. Chapter 3173. Doing business? Manager Jean raised his eyebrows. To be able to make you personally come to look for medicinal herbs, it seems that this business is very important to you. He and Steward Qin had known each other for many years. In fact, whether it was him or Steward Qin, they were both people who would not get up early without benefits. If there were not enough benefits, Steward Qin would definitely not take the trouble to come here personally. Steward Qin sighed. If we can't find the tears of cold flame, then this business can't be discussed. What's the use of saying all this now? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have sold the tears of cold flame to you. Now, I've put myself in such an awkward situation. Thinking of this, Steward Qin couldn't help but regret it. When he gave the tears of cold flame to Steward Jean, he thought that he had made a fortune. Now it seemed that he had suffered a huge loss. Did the other party say what he wanted the tears of cold flame for? Steward Jean asked tentatively. Alchemists need medicinal herbs. What's so strange about that? Steward Qin spread out his hands. Although he also felt that it was strange for Bailey Hongzhuang to be so persistent in finding the tears of cold flame. Alchemists often treated medicinal herbs as their own lives, so this kind of behavior was not strange. He felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was a genius. Not only was the effect of the healing medicine far better than the average healing medicine, but the pills she refined were also the same. Such geniuses often liked to research, so any kind of medicinal herbs could be what they needed. Hearing this, Steward Jean nodded and said, So that's how it is. However, Steward Qin did not notice the faint light that flashed in Steward Jin's eyes. Oh right, old Qin, the healing medicine you sold last time was very effective. It's comparable to a healing pill. Steward Jean laughed and said, Everyone has a lot of demand for this kind of healing medicine. I heard that you've been very busy recently. Steward Qin's face revealed a smile. This order for healing medicine is indeed not bad. Ever since he exchanged the prescription of the healing medicine from Bailey Hongzhuang, Steward Qin immediately sent people to start making it. It turned out that there was no problem with the prescription given to him by Bailey Hongzhuang, so he immediately ordered his doctors to make a lot of it. Sure enough, it caused an excellent response in Penglai Island. Regardless of whether it was the Penglai Palace, the 100 Flower Gate, or the Crimson Moon sect, they had all purchased many healing medicines from him. Of course, there were also many small factions. Just this alone had allowed him to earn a huge sum of money. Moreover, he had also earned many favors, so his harvest was extremely rich. It was precisely because he had tasted this sweetness that he wanted to make more deals with Bailey Hongzhuang. If he could obtain the secret to increasing the effects of the pills from Bailey Hongzhuang, then the value of the pills would be much higher than the healing pills. At that time, his status would be different from before. His influence on Penglai Island would definitely increase greatly. Unfortunately, this deal had encountered a decisive problem from the very beginning. Even the Golden Flame auction house couldn't do anything about it. It was simply too difficult for him. to collect the tears of Frosty Flame. You've also made a fortune in silence. Before, you didn't make any movements. I didn't expect that you would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat this time. You came specially for the tears of Frosty Flame. I'm afraid there are even more benefits in the deal, right? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.